Hey Val, thank you so much for joining us on today's video. I'm really excited because we have a lot to talk about, a lot of like different types of topics here. And first of all, just thank you so much for taking your time and talking to us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm also really excited to tackle all of these like tech topics and give advice or just, I don't know, be techies.
Yeah, for real, for real. And I guess just to start us off, could you kind of give a little background about yourself as well as like talk about how you sort of entered in the tech world?
Yeah, so my name is Val, and I'm actually originally from Peru, although now I live in New York City. I was born and raised in Peru, and when I was 13, much like a lot of people that come into computer science and become software engineers, I was really into video games at the time. So I wanted to learn how to make my own, and back in those days, Flash was still around, RIP. So I learned how to make Flash games based on YouTube tutorials. Eventually that led to me presenting that at a school project, and then a teacher really liked it and encouraged me to continue coding. And then I got so into it that I basically begged my parents to let me live with my family in the US. Because
So
I
you
really
got into coding when you were 13?
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Flash
insane.
games. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Flash games. But I mean, I would go a lot on like Newgrounds and those websites, but I would also go in like dress up games and like other kind of like girlsgogames.com kind of games. And those specifically, it's kind of odd that I don't know, like that as kind of like a source of like, oh, I want to get into coding because of girlsgogames.com. But it was really fun to make those types of games. And I wish that there was something nowadays available so that more people, especially like other girls that would be into those kind of things, could get into coding as well.
So you moved from Peru to the United States
Yeah.
when you were 15, just out of passion to pursue coding.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So take us from your journey then. So like where did you go in the US?
I went to this small border town in Texas called Brownsville. That's where I finished high school at. And then eventually I was able to apply to colleges. At first, I really just wanted like a good scholarship package. So I ended up in the Texas Panhandle. And then eventually I ended up in Central Texas. But yeah, I mean, it was an interesting experience, but I'm glad to be in New York City because that was my end goal after all.
Okay, cool. And what did you end up majoring in college?
Computer science major and then math minor.
Oh, dope. Okay, cool. And I guess as part of your journey, did you do like internships or did you just go straight full time?
No, I did an internship in my junior year of college, but I also did undergraduate research because I've always struggled with anxiety during exams. So I was like, I just want to take a class or multiple classes that do not require me to have exams. I just want to write like a super long research paper. So that was actually a lot more fun for me. And I did undergraduate research on data compression. So yeah, that's
dope.
yeah, I mean, and it also looks really good on your resume to say that, you know, you put in the time and wrote this whole research paper. You can put it as an additional project. So it really worked out for me in the end.
I want to ask you this pretty fun question. Through your career thus far, what's been your salary progression as a software engineer?
Ooh, so it's been a little bit shocking, especially because at the beginning, as an international student, I could only have on-campus jobs. And in 2017, I was working as a supplemental instructor for Calculus 2 at my college. And I was getting paid about $9 an hour or so, like I said. And then when I got my first internship, that went up to $26 an hour, which at the time was, yeah, it was really shocking to me. That was a lot of money at the time.
You tripled your salary, so yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So that was like a huge shock. But then I guess it didn't come to mind that was kind of like just the beginning. And eventually, you know, like you see $26 an hour and that's something that you eventually come to reject. But then, so yeah, I got my first internship in the summer of 2018. And then I got my first job. So an interesting thing is that I was supposed to get my job offer for the 2019, like May, after I graduated. But I asked my manager as an intern if maybe I could do my job part-time while I was doing my senior year in school. And she said yes. So I technically started as a software engineer while still being in school. And that I was getting like an actual software engineering salary, I believe. So that was at the time $75,000 a year. And I think with like a $5,000 bonus, which in Austin, Texas, that was like a pretty good amount of money for someone who's like 20 years old. So yeah, I was really stoked about that. I think that was around the salary range that most of my friends were getting, unless that they were going off to like a bigger city. So yeah, that was like 2018, 2019. Eventually at this same company, I think I was able to get up to 94 or 95 towards the end of 2020, 2021. And then I had an incident where I had to like immediately switch companies. I gave myself like a month break, and I wasn't expecting to really raise my salary by much because I had just quit my job very suddenly with no prospects. But no, I found another job that basically raised my salary by $40,000-$50,000 at the time. So that was really huge for me, especially in a moment where I needed it the most.
Oh, cool. And now, I guess, like you said, you're in New York City. Are you working in big tech at a startup? What's it like?
No, I am working at a startup. And I have been working at this startup since I was in Texas. It is completely remote. The unfortunate thing is that like I was really enjoying having like a New York City salary in Texas, and then once I moved here, that salary didn't change, but my happiness did change. So I don't really mind, but yeah, I've been really enjoying working at this startup because it's really flexible, as most of my team is based in the UK, so I don't really have a lot of meetings past noon.
Oh, cool. So, so do you work like what's a typical day in your life? Like, do you work remotely? What's it looking like?
Yeah, so we do have a small office for the people that live in New York City, but it's not mandatory to go into the office. So it's just kind of like an option if you are too tired of being stuck in your small box of an apartment. But it is fully remote. And yeah, like I said, most of my peers are based in the UK. So then from 9 a.m. to noon, it might be back-to-back meetings or one-on-ones or things. But then after that, it does get pretty quiet. And it's more of a culture of like, so long as the work gets done by the time that we check in during stand-up, like it's all good. So that's one of the things that I wanted to prioritize, especially at coming from my last job, which was in a very corporate environment, very strict. I wanted to be able to have flexibility and work-life balance. So what about you? Where are you based at, and what kind of like industry are you currently working at?
Yeah, so I work remotely as like a software engineer, like in like big tech, and it's been pretty awesome because like most of my team, they're based out in the West Coast. I live here in Northern Virginia and the East Coast. So the 9 a.m. over there is 12 p.m. here. So you never have meetings like before like 12 p.m. Like that's like the earliest you have a meeting, which is awesome, never having to wake up early. And like my team is like pretty flexible. So like even though like they're based off there in the West Coast, I never have to like work till like 8 p.m. I usually like work somewhere of a balance of like 10:30 a.m. to like 6:30 p.m. So it's kind of like best of both worlds. You get a little bit of your morning, a little bit of your evening. And yeah, it's just been pretty awesome like working in this field. I enjoy working remotely because as long as, similar to what you said, as long as you get the work done, no one really cares whether you're at your computer or not, And so, yeah, it's very much like that. I try to think of like my work as being like task-based instead of time-based.
Yeah.
With me, of course, just attending your meetings,
Yeah. Do you sometimes feel like you would be more productive in the office, or do you find ways of being productive when working remotely?
So I thought that at first, and obviously there is like a certain element of like going to the office, meeting your coworkers and all that. But honestly, like I feel like I'm pretty productive as long as like I sit at my desk. I have like a nice standing desk with my monitors. Like I basically designed it in a way so it maximizes my productivity.
Yeah.
And then I just like kind of grind in, lock into like whatever coding assignment I have to do. I'm usually able to get it done in like a particular like time frame. I don't think I need to particularly go into the office. Now, going into the office like has like other benefits of like meeting your coworkers and networking and all that, but that's one thing that I'll miss out on. But for the ease and flexibility of remote work, I don't think it's worth it for me right now.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like in the office, it was more like being in a state of panic because you always felt like you had somebody watching over your shoulder and making sure that you were working all the time, when sometimes it does help to take breaks and do things that, just to kind of like clear your mind off of things in order to find the solution and have address a problem with like a fresh mind. So you can actually be more productive if you're taking breaks and taking care of yourself.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And also like you don't have to worry about like commuting, you don't have to worry about like getting ready in the morning. Like literally my commute is like 15 steps from my bedroom to my office room. That's it, So I also want to ask you, so being a software engineer in a big city like New York City, what's that like? And what's that like compared to some other major metropolitan areas?
I would say that it is actually weirdly more relaxing because I come from Austin, Texas. I worked there for about like 3 years or so. And I feel like every person that you met was in tech in some way. And all your conversations always ended up being about tech, which is fun to a degree. And I think I've also heard that this happens a lot to people that live in San Francisco as well. But here in New York City, you meet such a diverse range of people with different like interests and hobbies and careers that there's really like a huge separation between your career, your work, and what you do outside of that. So I think it's great. And yeah, I also think it's great to be able to like actually go outside and touch grass. Like it's so easy to go outside and walk. It's amazing. Yeah. So what about you? How are you finding your city in terms of being a software engineer?
Yeah, I mean, wait, so first off, on your point, so I've never heard someone say like moving to New York City was relaxing. That would like those two words, I've never heard go in the same sentence together. So that was crazy to hear. But I mean, I mean, I understand your point. I like New York is a very like diverse city. Obviously, there's a huge financial sector, so it makes sense. So I guess to kind of go along with your point, so I actually used to live in San Francisco last summer, and I can tell like that was a very just like tech city. Yeah. Like everyone there is like in tech, in big tech. Everyone's asking, what's your TC? Everyone's trying to find out what new venture you're going to start. It's a very tech driven city, which is actually part of the reason that drove me away from the city. Because although I am in tech, I don't want my life to be just tech, Yeah. So I think, I see where you're coming from, and like being in New York, there's like the whole like finance sector. There's like a lot of different things to do. In terms of like the city I'm currently in, so I guess like the closest city to me is like Washington, D.C. I mean, I don't like really treat it as like a tech city. It's more of like a government city, and I'm not here because of the choice of like being in this metropolitan area, but it's just because like I grew up here, so I just decided to go back home after graduating to save some money, which is awesome as a remote software engineer.
Yeah. No, yeah, I definitely also stayed in Austin for a while, even after I had this job, because I was making like New York salary money, but in Texas, so I was able to save a lot of money, but eventually, I don't know, I wanted to be able to do other things and that, are really relaxing. Like one of my favorite things to do is that like after work on like a random Wednesday, I'll go to this like indie movie theater and I'll just watch a movie by myself from like the 1950s. So like I can do like cute little things like that now.
So I guess like, let's just say there's like this fresh college grad who just graduated, has job offers in different cities like San Francisco, Seattle, New York, and Austin. So these major 4 cities. For software engineering and I guess like career life overall, what would be your suggestion? How would you rank these cities?
Oh, I would say New York City, it is, but I'm also really biased. It is my favorite city in the world. Then
Uh-huh.
after that, I think Austin is a really good city for saving money. I think if you want a bit of more of a peaceful life, I did enjoy my time in Austin, but I think it came to an end. And then after that, I would say San Francisco because although I do like being up to date with like the latest tech and like meet a lot of people in the tech industry, I feel like from what I've gathered, it can be a little bit too much, at least like personally for me. And I feel like Austin does have kind of like a similar type of that energy of like, yes, we are a tech city, but it does relax a little bit more. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
I've been prioritizing a lot of relaxation as of lately and like things
Yeah.
that make me happy in
Uh-huh.
my own weird way. But what about you? How would you rate those cities?
Yeah, so I think so I would your order, but Seattle above San Francisco.
Oh,
So New York, Austin, Seattle, San Francisco. Because, like I said, I used to live in San Francisco, and I
yeah.
moved out pretty fast just
Oh,
because
wow.
I did not like it. Just like how expensive it is, like
Mm,
how dirty the city is, and
yeah.
as much as they take out for taxes, they still do nothing to like help the homeless population,
Yeah.
which is pretty unfortunate. And I actually I spent oh I spent like a couple weeks in Seattle one summer, and I really loved it there. And it is a tech city, but I
Yeah.
think it's a more, I don't know, I get like more of a relaxed vibe there.
Yeah.
um yeah, and so, but also like it is like a little like gloomy throughout the year. So I
Oh,
would
that's
say
right.
like New York definitely like number one.
Hmm.
I think Austin is a pretty cool city, and it's also like
Hmm.
on the up and coming, because
Yeah.
I know like a lot of people who actually leave California,
Yeah.
move to Texas, and then yeah, Seattle, and then San Francisco last, because I do not like that city.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's one of those places that you either like absolutely love or absolutely hate. But as of lately,
Hmm.
I've been hearing that a lot of people don't really like it. Seattle, I've gotten to visit. It is very beautiful, but I am a huge like public transit fan. So, my
Hmm.
cities definitely need to have that. And New York City is the best that we got in terms of that in the US.
Oh, for sure, for sure. All right, so I want to get into the next segment of the video. And so a lot of my audience, they are international students who are interested in coming to the United States for software engineering based roles. I mean, similar to you, who, as a person who came from Peru to the United States for the same reason, I kind of want to get into what kind of struggles did you face in like this whole process, as well as do you have any advice for international people seeking software roles in the United States?
Yeah, so I came to the US when I was 15, and I feel like that was actually quite an advantage because I could get started very early on with a lot of the resources and take advantage of the opportunities here. And I was able to finish high school here and apply for scholarships and all of that in order to get into like a US based college. So I do think starting as early as possible is probably going to be more beneficial to most people in the long run. But in general, just I would say being a go-getter, taking advantage of opportunities, getting straight A's is not going to get you far just on their own. You really have to like make yourself stand out there because there's only very limited places that offer scholarships for international students, for example. Like a lot of them ask you to be a US citizen, or jobs that sponsor and offer H-1 visas. That's also very limited. So you have to take advantage of all the resources that you have, excel
Mhm.
technically, but also excel in your communication skills and relationship building.
Yeah, so that was actually a really good point, because I have a lot of international friends, some of which who are like miles ahead of me in terms of like their technology knowledge, but just visa sponsorships, especially when the pandemic first hit, it was really hard for any of
Yeah.
them to get internships. And so my mentality that I encourage anyone who's like in this boat to adopt is that understand it is not a meritocracy. The person who knows the most technology wise isn't guaranteed the highest salary on their job, but rather, like you said, the communication aspect. Do you have good networking, good referrals? And so if you can recognize that like someone, just because they're a US citizen, might have a better shot than you at a company versus you who might know more but are international, understand that that difference will always exist. But what can you do to beat that? Well, it's the other stuff. It's like, can you work more on your skills, your communication skills? Can you actually get referrals to a bunch of companies? And a lot of people ask me, are referrals important in software engineering? And I'm actually curious to hear, what's your response to that? Are referrals important?
I think they open a door to several opportunities, but they are not going to guarantee you anything if you don't have the technical skills to back you up. So you're not going to get a job just based on referrals. You have to be able to pass the coding interview. Not everybody can do that. So take advantage of those opportunities. Get as many referrals as you can, but do not think that that's the end all be all and that's going to guarantee you an offer.
Yeah, I really like how you put it. It's like it doesn't give you the offer, but but it certainly is like the key to open the first door. You still have to walk through it. And so on that point, why don't you just reach out to a bunch of people on LinkedIn and DM them, ask them for referrals? Even if a lot of them say no, as long as you get one person at that company to say yes and give you a referral, you're good. And you expand your network while doing so. And some people are just like either too lazy to do that, or they think that referrals don't help. Well, even if they don't actually get you the offer, you might as well stack all the cards in your favor. So at the end of the day, you really have like, I don't know, no regrets while you're like in this process.
Yeah, I knew some very, very smart people when I was in college that would have like a 4.0 GPA, but some of them didn't end up getting a job offer in the end because they were kind of like isolating themselves. They didn't really put themselves out there. Meanwhile, I knew some people that they had a lot more communication skills. They were smart, but maybe not as like 4.0 level smart. And they were able to get a job like much more easily because they were networking. They were putting themselves out there. So really do not underestimate the ability to make connections in order to like open doors and things like that. All
right, cool. So I want to transition to the next segment of the video because I noticed some of your videos talking about being a woman in STEM or a woman in software engineering, as well as talking about how women used to dominate the computer science field. And I thought that was like pretty mind-boggling. So for those of you who haven't watched those videos, could you actually like give like a little bit of a synopsis of like what that's about?
Yeah, of course. So in the early stages of computing, actually coding, not how we know it nowadays, but in its very early form, was seen as more of a secretarial job, whereas like the guys were doing more of like the hardware, like tougher things. Women were doing like the repetitive kind of like softer coding, like office type of job in terms of computing. But then eventually, once computers became more accessible around the 1980s, we can see that it started being more of an interest to guys, especially, like dads that would buy like little boys like their first PC and then like teach them how to like trinket with them and like program and things like that. That's when kind of like the gender roles or stereotypes started being culturally and socially ingrained when it came to like computer science. And that's where we saw that although there were a lot more women getting CS degrees before, then after that got completely reduced and girls were just not seeing computer science as something that was meant for them anymore. It was very, very gendered. And yeah, to this day, I would say like the gap between like guys that get computer science degrees versus girls that get computer science degrees is still like pretty wide.
Okay, so if I walked into a computer science class in the 1970s, it would be majority girls?
Yes, I believe that prior to the 1980s, if you look at the statistics, it was mostly women that were pursuing computer science degrees rather than men.
Wow, that's kind of crazy to think because like, I mean, I went through a computer science degree. I mean, so have you. And like literally every single classroom was like 90% dudes, you know?
I saw the same, especially once you got into like the higher, like upper level classes. I think towards the end of my junior year in college, I walked into like an intro class and I did see kind of like a good divide. But then I would go into like my upper level classes and I would see that the women were gone. Like they had tried the intro class maybe because they saw like the salaries and all the hype around like doing computer science, but then something happened and they left.
Okay, so that's interesting. And as a person who's kind of in this minority category of like being a woman in STEM, how has that like affected you? And like, do you feel like at any disadvantage or have you been like negatively affected in any way?
Yes. I wouldn't say that it's in the sense of like, oh, I'm not getting as many job opportunities and things like that. But maybe I believe that there might be some data to back that up. But just personally, I think job seeking wise, I've been pretty good. But I would say once I'm in the position, I have had several experiences where I am not being taken seriously, or there's been like very inappropriate comments. So I do feel like in general, you do have to become a very assertive person as a woman in order to navigate this industry. Otherwise, you're going to get crushed.
And do you have any advice for like girls out there who may be studying computer science right now, or are thinking about the field and maybe are a little scared of like the disadvantage present?
Yes, I would say that you are going to probably experience or have some kind of like story in the future of something that happened to you, whether it is while getting your degree or in the industry, and that it's horrible and you should stand up to it. I have so many regrets where I just kind of like kept quiet and didn't say anything, and it just got worse. So yeah, definitely like become more assertive. You do need to have like thick skin to be in this industry as a woman. Stand up for, defend yourself. You know, like if somebody disrespects you, even if you feel like you're going to be completely alone, you know, and it's you against them, there might be somebody at your workplace that can be your support system. I would say, yeah, definitely finding a support system. One of the few other women at the workplace, they tend to very much relate to what's going on. And they're willing to back you up. I think it's been a lot harder for me to navigate such conflict and difficult situations in the workplace where I'm feeling disrespected, where I have been somewhere where there's not a lot of women versus when I've been somewhere where I've had a support system of wonderful women.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess I can't really comment on personal experiences because I'm obviously not a girl, but like, I do want to say that's another advantage of having like a good network is that, like, for example, if you were being underpaid, you have network of people maybe you could be like talking to, like what's going on, or you're in a weird situation, or things just don't appear right to you. And it could be because you're being judged or being biased against. And it doesn't just have to be like against women. It could be like racial or like other types of biases. You will be aware of it if you have like a network of people that you could be talking to who are like maybe like your close peers that are in the same industry as you.
Yeah, absolutely. Having connections and peers that support me, even like after all these years, just having them remember you and like know that you like made an impact on them in some way. It has had a huge advantage on me, because there's some people that I know that they can hit me up or I can hit them up and they can give me a referral. I can give them a referral. So yeah, it's huge for whenever you're job seeking, or, you know, whenever you want to know if you're being like underpaid, like you said, or things like that. But at least in my case, the biggest advantage is to have someone to back you up when it comes to like some kind of like workplace dispute or incident.
All right, so for the next segment of the video, I actually want to pull up your resume and show it to the audience, and let's review it. I want to talk about some good things, bad things, and maybe some lessons that the audience can learn from this. So first of all, thank you for sending your resume. Let's put it up on the screen now. And at first glance, could you name some good things about your resume?
I would say it is very detailed, but to a degree where it might be too much detail. I have like both of my jobs listed in there, and descriptions of like some very, very major achievements that I had in both those jobs and projects and things like that. I also pretty clearly list the languages, frameworks that I'm proficient in, and like the tools and technologies that I've worked with. So you can have a very clear idea of what I've been doing these past couple years tech-wise. But I guess like I wasn't able to even fit, for example, like my internship, but I think by this point it might be a little bit irrelevant given the other experience that I have.
And I guess on that point, if there's some things that you could improve on your resume, what would you say?
I would say I would try to shorten the descriptions. I feel like I just try to highlight the importance and like the things that I did in each one of those projects, but maybe I provided way too much detail, so it looks a little bit cluttered. But I would say that I would rather have it look a little bit too cluttered rather than too empty. So I would just need like somebody to kind of like look over it and like shorten it, or maybe I can use ChatGPT to get it to do that.
So I guess that was actually something that I was going to point out, is that maybe like like for example, your first experience, you have like a whole like 2 paragraphs to describe it. I generally recommend people to have like 1 to 2 lines like per bullet point, and then have like maybe like 3 to 4 bullet points max. I actually do a lot of resume reviews on like my TikTok and Instagram, and formatting and like neatness is like a huge thing for me. So that's like one big thing like I try to emphasize to people is try to keep it like short and concise, because recruiters, they look at your resume for an average about like 6 to 8 seconds. So you got to make sure like things like pop out and like are concise, so they don't just like toss your resume in the trash. But I guess on that point, what are some common mistakes that you see people make on their resume?
I would say it's kind of like the opposite, because I feel like sometimes I don't really get like a clear idea of what they've worked on, or it's kind of just, oh, I did some test cases and fixed some bugs, but it's like, okay, but kind of like how did that impact the company, or like what were some of the achievements of the project that you did? So then I feel like I've overcompensated in that regard. So yeah, I just need to like polish it up and try to like summarize that a little bit better.
Yeah, and one pointer for those who are interested in quote unquote impact to a company, any like numbers, statistics that you can put really look well. Like I know one guy's resume I reviewed, he said like he was able to, I think like have an impact of like $2,000. That's like a quantifiable thing. Or like this app he downloaded had like 8,000 downloads. That's a quantifiable thing. That's a clear impact. And numbers are just like a huge advantage to any resume, because like numbers, it drives eyeballs to the resume. So like everyone would like love to see and pretty much understand what's going on there. So that's just like a general tip for anyone. Do you have like general tips for people?
No, yeah, definitely finding out what's the monetarily impact. And I think on my resume, I put that like, oh, like I worked on a major authentication application that serves over 30 million accounts, which is a lot of accounts.
Huge.
So So, I probably could have added that in other places, but like I said, I do need to kind of like polish it up in terms of description. But yeah, just like numbers, like facts, like things that are not very abstract. It's like just details that are very much like, this is how much of a value I am able to offer to these companies and will be able to potentially offer to this company that I'm applying to. Yeah, awesome. And for those who are interested, I offer free resume reviews on my TikTok and Instagram. So if you're interested, check out the link in my bio on those platforms. Aside from kind of like the description and like listing it out, what are some additional things that you would want to like fix about my resume? Yeah, so one thing that I kind of don't like is this whole like 2-column format of like having skills on like the left-hand side and like a bar that's like halfway. It's like half your page has like the experience bar. I think that's like a little weird formatting. I like having sections where it's like skills on top, and then underneath that is like the languages, like, and then experience it as a section underneath that. So it's like instead of left and right, it's like top, bottom. So that, and other than that, like the numbers would be nice to add, but overall yours is like pretty well formatted. So like there isn't too much to criticize here. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think I overcompensated because back when I was looking for a job, my resume obviously like didn't have as much experience as now, but because of the descriptions that I wrote, it hit a lot of like keys, or I guess like, like word, like on LinkedIn specifically, like so I got probably like 200 recruiters like messaging me from all of these companies because like it hit like so many like different like technologies and like language, keywords, like the keywords. So like just making it keyword heavy like really benefited me. But I think in this case, like it's more like description heavy rather than keyword heavy. So I would have to revise that.
at the end of the day, if it's like getting you jobs, doesn't really matter how it looks, right?
Right.
Yeah. It's more
but
like, go for it.
No. I was just saying, just to make people's lives easier also. And it's a little bit of psychology that, you know, like somebody is going to process the information faster and like keep you in the back of your mind, you know, as over other people if they see like a very nicely formatted resume that is like clear and concise.
For sure. All right, awesome. So first of all, thank you for sharing your resume. I think that was pretty useful for everyone watching. And the next question I want to ask is, so there's a lot of talk about either becoming a front-end developer or a back-end developer or a full-stack developer. What sort of area, I guess, are you first in, and what do you recommend people to get into?
So I've always been mostly interested in backend. So I've mostly stuck to backend, but recently in a startup, you often have to take on additional roles. So I've technically become a lot more full stack. I still focus on backend the most, but I have been able to learn React. But I do find myself not enjoying front end as much as back end. It's just like a personal preference. And I feel like I'm able to thrive and deliver better solutions in backend development rather than front end. But if you're somebody that likes more of that visual feedback that front end development provides, then I think that's right for you. But I would say, you know, it really depends on like the interest of a person. You don't want to do something like backend if you're miserable doing it, or you would be much happier doing front end. So what about you? What are your thoughts about like choosing like front end or back end?
Yeah, so I'd say like when you're first starting out, try to get experience in both. Try to be like sort of that full stack role. I mean, you're kind of in a fortunate situation of like being able to wear multiple hats, you know, like being able to do some front end, back end while in your startup. So I would say like try to get exposure to both. I'd say like personally, I have a preference to the front end side of things because like how like nice you can make things look, how you can like impress people. Like I always tell people, like if you aren't aware of like the technology at hand, you can still understand the front end of a website. You can say like, oh, this looks nice. Oh, that was such a cool feature you implemented. But if you're a backend engineer, it's really hard to show off your work. Unless you know the technology or can look at API calls and can understand like the performance of things, you're not going to be really wowed by backend work. Like you're wowed by the front end at the end of the day. So that's like one little like thing. When a lot of people I see like on TikTok be like, oh, front end sucks. Front end engineers aren't even real engineers. And so that's kind of like my response. So at least we can show off our work, but you can't. But I'd say like honestly, the money is probably like in the back end, and usually tech companies, their proprietary like cool technology is in the back end. I mean, did you have something to say? I think I cut you off.
No, it's all right, because I actually think it's the opposite. Like I find front end engineering to be much more difficult. Like I still struggle with React a lot more, so that I have to wait for kind of like the senior like front end engineers to help me out, because it's just, I don't know, it's a little bit more confusing to me. Like, I don't know why backend just clicks in my head more. I'm also like not a very like honestly organized person. Like I like pretty things, but I'm not, I guess like the type A personality probably will never be. So like the backend can get like a little bit messy, but it's just kind of like a mad scientist type of messy kind of thing. And I feel like with front end, everything's so like nice and beautiful that I can't do it.
Yeah. But I guess like going into that point, so because you're like primarily in the back end, I'm just curious to know, what technologies do you need to know, and what resources could someone use to learn these technologies?
Well, I would say some of the most popular like backend programming languages are, for example, like Java. You can also have like Python as a backend language. I use Ruby, with the Ruby on Rails framework. But you will also find, especially like some very, very low level stuff like C++, C, C Sharp, and yeah, I would say a lot of, if you're doing like a computer science major, a lot of colleges will start you off with like Java or C. And for backend development, and you will be learning data structures, object-oriented programming. But you can also reinforce that knowledge, especially if you're not going to college, through a lot of different online resources, such as YouTube tutorials. Free Code Camp has a tutorial, and I feel like almost every like programming language out there. So yeah, there's a ton of like really cool free stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And I know one website I always talk about for Python specifically, Codedex.io. It's like this game environment. Cody Tech is also a really good resource just for like a bunch of different programming languages. And they give you like these bite-sized lessons. They have like an AI assistant to help you out. And Free Code Camp is obviously a really good one. For front-end development, I could say like know your React.js, Angular, Vue.js, like pretty much it's within JavaScript. And once again, Free Code Camp is a good resource, but also I recommend people practice by coding in this thing called CodePen.io, which is like this sort of like coding sandbox where you can like write your like JavaScript code and you can see like the component being like shown as like you're like typing the code. So you see like sort of like the immediate aesthetics that you're putting in there. But yeah, that's my opinions on the front end. What would you say about front end technologies?
I would say I kind of have like an additional thing to say that I think frontend is very accessible for like people that want to get to know programming, because like I said before, the visual feedback is very fast. And I think you can make things like games, especially for like, you know, like kids or teenagers that kind of just want to make something fun. Frontend is very, very accessible. And backend, like if you make somebody like do like an inventory like program in Java, and it's like, okay, this is what coding is like they're gonna get bored. They're going to be like, what is this? But what about like, okay, like let's say a dress up game. I love dress up games. And I did do some on like JavaScript back in the day, as well as like ActionScript, like back when Flash existed. I think one of the ones that is kind of like fun that I've seen kind of like that is the Khan Academy's, I think, like Intro to JS through animations. It's kind of like a short, quick thing, but it allows you to do like a fun little like animation with like an animal or something of the sort. I think, yeah, like bringing like fun ideas and like possibilities to coding is really what's going to bring like more people to be interested in them. Because like I said, like you showed me like those inventory like Java programs that I had to do in college, like, you know, I would have just been like, what the hell is this? Like, no, like this is so boring.
Yeah. All right. But I am curious to know, what do you think pays more, and what's sort of better in the future to go into, front end, back end, or full stack?
I would say, I think there are some very niches in the backend technology that I think pay extremely well. But I think there's a benefit to full stack, because you can also become kind of like independent. Like you have the power to create, to even like start your own startup, because you have an idea of like, okay, this is kind of like what the visual aspects of the program works, but also I have like a very complex understanding of the underlyings of it. So I would say full stack is like a really, really valuable experience. But for example, I would say there's some very like specific things that pay a lot, like graphic programming, for example. I guess like it's some type of backend, and it's very complex and it's very niche. So yeah, and there's other types of things that are very, very niche that people can look into that are technically backend. So what about you? What would you recommend to people? And what do you think is kind of like a better prospect for students looking to get into the field?
Yeah, so I'd say like overall, students, people who are just starting out their career, get a taste of both. Try to go into like full stack development. Just see what you like, see what you don't like. So then you can kind of go about that. But like I said, I agree with you, or like you said, I agree with you about like backend, specifically like being able to pay more. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, will AI take over software engineering roles? Well, unfortunately, AI is getting pretty good right now in terms of the front end aesthetics that it's able to create. So I would say if I had to choose between which it's going to take first, front end or back end, it would probably be front end, just because of like how replaceable it is, in that like it's just a couple of like React, Vue, or Angular, those type of technologies on like every company's like front end. So it's like pretty easy to like kind of move around. But like the back end, although it might be like still like the Python, Java in a lot of companies, it's like kind of like proprietary as to like the whole business logic that's going on in the background. So it's a little tougher to replace. Hence why it does generally pay more. But I am curious, I guess I brought up like a new subject right here about AI taking over software engineering. Do you think AI is going to take over software engineering?
So it is going to change it for sure, but I don't think it's going to take over it completely in the way that people have been so terrified of these past couple months. And I especially got the opportunity recently this year to speak to a head of product of Microsoft, Amanda Silberg.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I have a video on the topic actually, but basically to summarize it, that same question was asked to her, and like, what are some ways in which like people of this day and age can stay up to date and be competitive in the age of AI? And she said that system design is going to be something that is going to be pretty difficult to replace. Like you can have AI write code for you, but at least like right now, if you ask it about system design, it's going to need like way more information than what you can currently provided. So that kind of like connection of like, how do we get this type of like system to work with this system, and like, you know, like go through this authentication, like, you know, like have this data from one place to another, all of the architecture that especially in way like super huge companies that is like so complex, like that is going to take a lot to replace, and that is in just having like a very solid understanding of how that works and being able to create your own systems. That is what is going to like put you at the most competitive, as among one of the most competitive people in the field, in the age of AI. So what do you think are some additional things that people can look into in order to become competitive in this, I guess, like boom of AI?
Yeah, so two things. So the first thing on your point, so the system design aspect of things. So if you're a software engineer that only knows how to code, can only take certain requirements and type code out to output it, then you for sure are very, very likely to get replaced by AI, because that is fundamentally what AI does. It takes in a prompt and it gives an output. But rather, if you know how to design systems, how to take in customer requirements, how to prioritize things, how to plan things out and do things on like a grander scale of like dealing with like this architecture and treating this as more of like a business assignment rather than just like a prompt that you have to spit an output of code to, that's one way you can fortify yourself in the upcoming of AI. And the second thing that I would say is like learning more about the AI itself. Like, although AI is coming, there are potential new job opportunities. The uproar of prompt engineering is going to come through. And truly, at the end of the day, if AI is to the point where they're taking over a lot of software engineering jobs, the only people that are going to be quote unquote safe in that regard are the people who know how to utilize the AI as a tool rather than like, I don't know, like the person who just knows how to click at their computer and not do anything else.
Right. I mean, if you can't fight them, join them and learn exactly how to take advantage of it. I mean, I'm seeing AI, of course, like there's a little bit of fear around it, but I'm trying to see it as a very advanced Stack Overflow right now, where, you know, I'm not going to let it take over the duties that I have, especially when it comes to like system design. But it is very easy for me to become like a lot more productive when I ask it a very specific question. And that's where like the whole prompt engineering thing comes in. It's like you can save a lot of time by knowing what questions to ask. So yeah, it's, you know, it's those times where like, oh, I could have like looked through like so many different tabs in like Stack Overflow, but instead I like just get it so quickly through ChatGPT. Like that is a time saver and that is a benefit, that is a resource. But at the same time, I'm not going to let ChatGPT do my entire like job. I don't think it's that powerful, truly.
Yeah. At least not yet. At least
not yet. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. So I guess speaking of like changes to the software engineering world. I'm a little young out here, but I'm curious. Ever since you graduated since 2019, and now that it's 2023, almost 2024, how has the world of software engineering changed?
I would say it's getting a little scary out here. I mean, of course, we just talked about AI. That was not even, well, I mean, I guess there were some discussions over it, you know, like I knew some people that were taking a machine learning class in college, but there wasn't as much hype around it and it wasn't as advanced as it is today. People were still, like I said, entirely relying on like Stack Overflow. Nobody was asking ChatGPT any questions. So yeah, that has been shocking to see that now that is a resource that students can take advantage of or can exploit in a way that they shouldn't because, you know, they're not learning actually. And then
resources are resources, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well,
we were all students at one point.
I know. I'm just saying, you know, I'm trying to protect myself here.
Okay.
But still, yeah, I would say aside from that, though, the job market has become a lot more competitive because back then software engineering, you know, like the Google movie had come out like a couple years before. So there was like some hype around like, oh, like in tech, like you have this super cushy job and you can take naps or whatever and you have free food. But there wasn't, I think, as much hype as like 2020 and beyond gave to it. And I think the market truly started becoming like a lot more saturated around that time. So finding a job definitely was not easy at all. But I think right now it is way more competitive and you really like you can't mess around your freshman year anymore. You have to like really like be focused like as soon as you get your foot into college. So yeah, what has been your experience? What year did you graduate?
So I graduated 2022. So I've been working full time for about like 1.5 years. But like to the degree that I can talk about in terms of like specific like recent events with all like these layoffs and like job offers getting rescinded, things just not looking well. All I can really say is that this happens. I was obviously like in college at the time when the pandemic hit, and we had a lot of job offers getting rescinded, internship offers getting rescinded, a lot of people layoffs, the economy was crashing. But guess what? The next year, things got back to normal. And in fact, not just back to normal, it was a boom. It was an uproar. And people were hiring like crazy, getting amazing job offers. And now I guess a little bit of a correction is going on now to like adjust for that. So the job market's not looking good again. But guess what? In the next couple of years, it's probably going to do well again. So as long as I always like, this is more of like kind of like a productivity thing, but it's like as long as you consistently do the right things in that you're making sure your resume is good, you're getting your connections, you're getting your referrals, you're practicing your data structures and algorithms consistently. I think you'll be good at the end of the day. And you shouldn't really stress out about your outlook, because although you may not be able to get a job in like the next 6 months, if you're able to get it at some point and build like a career is not 6 months, a career is like 50-60 years. I think you'll be good in a 50-60 year span of time.
Yeah, actually, on that subject, I was just talking to some people that have been developers for like over 20 years, and they went through the .com burst, and they were like sharing the parallels of like the uncertainties and like the fear, and how even though like that seemed to be the end, you know, like all of these companies, all of these startups just like closing up, like everything shutting down. 10 years from then on, you saw like the boom of tech companies like offering all of these like crazy perks and things like that. So yeah, I mean, it truly is kind of like a cycle that is quite unpredictable. But although times may be hard right now and there's going to be like a lot of changes, I am pretty optimistic that like things are going to like go back up and then back down and then back up. Are you optimistic about the future of tech?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really like exciting with all like the advancements of the AI and just how more technologically the world is moving. Like the fact that so many people own smartphones, and like how even kids at like my school, like in elementary school, are getting like Chromebooks to like supplement their education. Like technology is now sort of being like a tool in every aspect of our life. So it's kind of what you brought up earlier, either what was it, like join them or lose to them, something along those lines. Like you gotta like learn to adapt and learn to pick up on technology regardless of whatever field you're in, whether you're even in the medical field or like a law field. Like learning technology and using it to your advantage can make your life way more efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. In this very like fast changing industry, you have to be very adaptable. And then I would say like even going above and beyond as to like, you know, like in your, I wouldn't say like dedicate like life outside your work to like learning about tech all the time. But when you have a free time, listen to a podcast about like the up and coming technology, like read some books, like stay up to date. Stay up to date with things because things are fast changing. And if you're just doing like the same repetitive stuff at your job like all the time, then like it's going to be hard to apply to new jobs.
All right, so kind of just wrapping up here real quick. So one big question that I get a lot is, as a full-time software engineer and a person who posts content online, how do you balance your time? And I'm actually curious, what's your answer to that? How do you balance your time?
Oof, that's difficult because I'm still trying to figure it out. I feel like I'm not very consistent when I post and I'm trying to be better at it. But I would say I just follow kind of like that like little spark of motivation. I also don't want to be posting things just for the sake of posting. So I would say every piece of content that I've put out is really something that I wanted to share with the world at the time. But I think if somebody is thinking of like really being consistent and, you know, having like a structure to content, they should set up aside some time, maybe like right before work. I have heard of some people that like they wake up first thing in the morning, they go to the gym, and then they set up like 1 hour to record any kind of content. And I think that's magnificent, and I want to follow that. But probably a 2024 goal because I'm being lazy these past couple or like the remainder of 2023 is going to be like my lazy time, basically. So what about you? Like, what's kind of like your structure for balancing working and posting content?
Yeah, so when I first started making like these like TikTok, Instagram videos, it was a bit of a challenge in that like having to just, because I was trying to put like 1 to like 3 times a day, just like pumping out content. And at sometimes like you got to really think, is this good content, or how do I structure it, or how do I edit it, or do I have to re-record it? So there's like a lot of thought process that goes onto it. And thankfully I've been able to sort of now grown my account to the point where I'm able to hire out editors. I'm able to hire people to sort of do certain things that would normally take a lot of my time and things that I don't necessarily enjoy. So now I'm basically to the point where I think of an idea. I know kind of generally if it's a good topic or not based off of previous performances. And then I send it to my editors. They do everything and all I have to do is upload. So I've minimized my work to a way that I'm able to just kind of sit in front of a camera. So I'm getting better returns than I was before, but doing less work, which is much nicer. And I just either like before work or I guess like after work now, just pull up my camera, record, send it over to my editor whenever they're able to get back to me, post it. That's pretty much my simple workflow.
Yeah, that does make it a lot easier because I feel like most of the time I'm not really dreading making the content. I am dreading like, okay, now I have to like edit this and like add all the text and the captions and all of those things. So I probably should consider like hiring an editor because
for sure.
It seems like it's not a lot of work, but it is a lot of work. It's not just like, you know, like turning on your camera and that's it.
Yeah.
So much goes into it.
Thank you so much for everything today. I really appreciate it. Like for all the questions you answered, I certainly did learn a lot through your own past experiences as well as sharing your resume. And I really hope that this was beneficial to anyone who's watching.
No, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here. I feel like I also learned a lot from you. And I also learned a lot about like my resume and kind of like what's going on as of lately in the tech industry. Like, I feel like this has been really like, it has like, you know, I feel like sometimes tech, it can be exciting, but it can get like a little bit too repetitive, or especially when you're doing kind of like some like similar things for the last couple of months at work. So this has definitely like kind of like lit a spark in my mind. Like, okay, yeah, like tech is actually really cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you take care. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you so much. You too. Bye-bye.